Well, PL College, I'm going to be honest with y'all. If I had to tell you a secret of my life that I didn't want a lot of people to know, it's this, is that I used to hate running. I thought it was the dumbest thing. How many people do I have it's not the runners club. How many people do I have that are like the hate runners club? Like, wow. All right, A15 does not value cardio in the house, and that's okay. Hey, y'all, I'm going to be honest with you. I hated running, and I hated runners who loved running because I felt like a lot of times when they would talk about running, they would say things that I was like, that's a flat out lie. And here's what I mean by that. Y'all ever talk to somebody who's talking about the runner's high? Like that person who's like, oh my gosh, like the runner's high is incredible. And you're like, oh my gosh, that sounds great. What is that? And they're like, by the time you hit mile 7, you just get this euphoric feeling in your body. And I'm like, you're a liar. Like that's not a real thing. The only runner's high I've ever had is when I'm running at Advent Park and I pass somebody and I don't throw up next to someone that I have to live in this town with. And I can like keep it in my throat and I'm like, that's the runner's high. It's got to be. And I just like keep going. Or you meet people and they're like, no, running is like, it's the first and best hobby. They're like, it's the first thing that people did when they ever wanted to enjoy something. And I'm like, also a lie. Like the first person who ran did not do it for fun. They were being chased by a T-Rex and they just started moving their feet faster and like running was invented. Like again, it's not true. It's not a real thing. And y'all, I used to hate running so much. I literally, this is embarrassing, but I remember one time in college, someone was like, hey, you should go and start running and getting involved in like cardio stuff. And I remember vividly saying to this person, yeah, well, the only cardio I believe in is running from your problems. And they were like, wow, you need to go to counseling and go for a run. Like, let's just wrap those two things together. And so for like most of my life, I hated running until about a year and a half ago. And then I found something that I actually hate more than running. And the thing that I have learned that I hate more than running is being an unhealthy dad. Because what I started to realize was like, man, I want to be able to run with my son when he's kicking the soccer ball. I want to be able to dance with my daughter like in our living room and not get winded by it. And so y'all, I'm going to be honest with y'all. I know this is shocking. I've started running. And I like it. It's like I'm telling y'all, like the shoes they like you would never wear because they're like look like they're made of marshmallows, but they're really comfy. Like Strava, when you can look on an app and find someone's goal and go, I'm gonna beat that. Like the mental toughness it takes of your body being like, hey, if you keep running, you're gonna pee your pants, and you're going, I'm doing a mile more. Like, I like it. And I'll be honest with y'all, I'm not the guy who's gonna be like doing like running around town in like 4-inch inseams, like training for the St. Jude. Like, that's not my journey. I still gotta live in this town. But I enjoy running now. And what I have discovered the more that I run is this, that my problem was not with running. My problem was that I had an unhealthy view of a really healthy thing. I had an unhealthy view of a healthy thing, and once I understood how good running actually was, it changed the game for me. And I think that's true for all of us. And you may not have the same view of running that I've had, but we all have an unhealthy view of something called work in our lives. We all, to a certain degree, have an unhealthy view of work, of working, of going to work. And here's what I mean by that. A lot of us fall in one of two camps. We either think work is something that needs to be avoided like the plague, like I don't want to do it, it's not for me, it's not my thing. Or we move to the other side of the spectrum and we treat work like it is the all-encompassing thing in our life. And we become workaholics and we love it and we think it's the best thing. And both are problematic. And if we're not careful, what can happen is we get to a place that we start to believe that work may actually be sinful, that it may be a bad thing. But what if we've gotten it all wrong? What if we have an unhealthy view of something that actually is really healthy? Because in Genesis 1:1, it starts out, the Bible begins this way. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It was a work. It was something that he did to create. The Bible begins with work, and every time God completed a part of the work that he did, he called it good. He was affirming the work that was done. And not only did God create in Genesis 1, God created man and woman, and then he created us to work. Genesis 1:28 and 29 says, then God blessed them, talking about Adam and Eve, and said, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and govern it. Reign over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and all the animals that scurry along the ground. We were created to work, and work did not become a burden until sin entered the picture in Genesis 3. But up until that point, it was a good thing to enjoy. And what we're going to do tonight is we're going to get a healthy view of what work is. We're in the middle of this series called the Psalms of the Ascent, where we're learning about these psalms, these songs that the people of God would sing as they would go to worship in Jerusalem every year. And as they would travel, they would sing these songs about the life that God created us for to help us better worship the God who created us. And so we've talked about things like joy and worship. And today we're going to look in Psalm 127, the psalm that AB just read, and we're going to talk about work. But what we're going to understand by the end of tonight, after studying and spending time in Psalm 127 in God's Word, is we're going to understand that the work that God has given you is meant to be a blessing from Him and a joy to do with Him. That any work that you step into in your life is a blessing from God and a joy to do with Him. Which means that biochem homework that you keep putting off, that you don't want to deal with tonight, that's still due at midnight, can be a blessing. That your practice for rush, where you're trying to get outside and clap every single day and get everything together and you don't know what kind of outfit to wear and it's very stressful, can be a blessing. That you stocking shelves at your job, or you editing Excel documents, or you going to the gym, all of these things can be a blessing from God and a joy to experience with Him if we start to change how we view some of these things, because somewhere along the line we've lost sight of that. And we've corrupted work to either become a hazard to avoid or an idol to worship. And God's going to right our perspective tonight in a way where we have a healthy perspective of work. And I think if we're going to start to get that healthy perspective, that healthy viewpoint, the first thing that we need to understand when it comes to work, the first point that you should write down is this: it's don't rebrand Babel. I know that makes no sense to you. And here's why. In Genesis 11, you start to see a story, and it really kind of starts in what we just read in Genesis 1:28. In Genesis 1:28 and 29, God creates Adam and Eve, and He says, "Be fruitful and multiply and govern the earth." The first work that God gives to man and woman is to procreate, recreate, and then spread out over the world and bring it into submission, bring it into order like He intended. But sin enters the picture, and by the time we get from Genesis 1 to Genesis 11, humanity's gotten corrupted. And they go, hey, we know God told us to move out into the world, to do all these different things, but we kind of like being comfortable, we kind of like staying together. And humanity got to a point where they actually said, hey, we don't just want to disobey what God is doing, but we actually realize we're really good at working together and doing our own thing. And we know God's up in heaven and we're down on earth. And so actually, instead of us trying to be obedient to God, what if we did something that made us like God? And the people in Genesis 11 started to build a tower. They called it the Tower of Babel. And their desire was to literally build a tower up to heaven to be like God. Humanity started to think that their lives were about productivity to be like God when God created them to have a dependency on Him. And so God did the loving and the just thing. He took all of humanity, He confused the languages, and He spread them out. And we look at the story of the Tower of Babel. You may have learned about it in Sunday school, and we go, that's a great story. I love that in the Bible. But man, that was then, this is now. Surely none of us would ever do something like that. Like, surely none of us would ever be that prideful, that disobedient. How could we ever think that we would be on the same page? But can I tell y'all, if we're being honest when it comes to work, we try to recreate the Tower of Babel daily in our lives. And here's what I mean by that. We got a lot of visuals tonight, so that was one of them. None of us would say in and of ourselves that we're trying to recreate the Tower of Babel. Like, no one's going out off Jackson and being like, I'm going to build a tower. But here's what we do a lot of times. We get to work in our lives, and we start to get a mindset where we go, yeah, God's equipped me, God's given me gifts, I love Him, He's so good. But really, when it comes down to work, it's dependent on me. And I know God's blessed me, and I know God's good, but if I'm being honest, man, I'm just going to tell you, like, I'm a self-made man. I hustled for this. I earned this. I deserve this. Man, I know God's telling me to tithe. I know God's telling me to be generous. I know God's telling me that He wants to do a work in my life. But if I'm being honest, I'm the one who's doing it. And I showed up at 8 in the morning when God wasn't there. And so we wouldn't call it a Tower of Babel, but we're building one. And we wouldn't call it a Tower of Babel, but we would rebrand it, and we would call it financial success. We would call it a successful career, a legacy, financial security, the American dream. And we start to rebrand Babel in our own lives. And I think if we were being honest with ourselves, a lot of the ways that we approach work really shows who we think is in control of our lives. We would never say that we would build a physical tower to try and get to heaven, but a lot of us would try to build a life of work that would make us feel like we're the God of our own lives. And Solomon wants to shatter this mindset. And so he starts out in Psalm 127, verse 1, and he says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, the work of the builders is wasted. Unless the Lord protects a city, guarding it with sentries will do no good." Look at how he starts both of those lines. He says, unless the Lord builds, unless the Lord protects. Solomon starts out the psalm about work and makes it very clear that if God is not working in the midst of it, it is a doomed endeavor from the start. Solomon was the wisest man to ever live. He was the richest man to ever live. And yet Solomon is saying, hey, when I commit myself to work, even though I have access to every resource, asset, skill set that money could buy, if God is not present, I'm not going to touch it. He says it has to depend on God. If God's not there, I don't want to build a Tower of Babel that is not what God wants for my life. Do we approach work the same way? Do we have a dependency on God that is so real and tangible that we ask ourselves, hey, is God in this? And if he's not, we don't begin the project. Do we have a reliance on God that believes that unless he is a part of the dream that we have or the goal that we've set or the work that we're doing, it wouldn't be worth starting it? That's the heart that Solomon is creating here. And he starts it in verse 1, and then he moves on in verse 2, and he says, it's useless for you to work so hard from early morning till late at night, anxiously working for food to eat, for God gives rest to the ones he loves. Solomon's doing something huge here. He's showing that without God, your work is pointless. It's anxiety for anxiety's sake. And I am convinced a lot of the anxiety that we wrestle with in life, a lot of the things that if you had to list out what makes you anxious on a day-to-day basis, if you were to be honest about it, it's because you're trying to work at something and God's not a part of it. And Solomon in verse 2 is saying that's where our anxiety comes from. In the book, A Long Obedience in the Same Direction by Eugene Peterson, he says it this way. He says, our work goes wrong when we lose touch with the God who works his salvation in the midst of the earth. The thing that we have to realize when it comes to what we do is that work does not exist to become our God. Work exists to show our need to rely on God. Work is not there for it to become the thing that you worship, for it to become the thing where you make yourself, where you think you're worthy of worship. Work exists for you to acknowledge a reliance on God. Solomon would say it this way in Ecclesiastes 5. He says, even though I have noticed one thing at least that is good, it's good for people to eat, drink, and enjoy their work under the sun during the short life that God has given them and to accept their lot in life. And it's good to enjoy. It's a good thing to receive wealth from God and a good health to enjoy it. To enjoy your work and accept your lot in life, this is indeed a gift from God. Solomon makes a really subtle shift, but it's important. Solomon still encourages work. He points to the value in productivity, and he even talks about how acquiring wealth can be a good thing. But the focus that he has in doing all this is shifted. He says, hey, if you have a life and an ability to work, the very fact that you can inhale and exhale is a gift from God. He says the wealth that you acquire, Chip's talked about this over the last couple weeks. If you have any money in the bank account, it's God's anyway. He's just giving it to you to be a steward of in the moment. The joy that you have from being good at what you do is a gift from God. Even the excitement that you have over the future that you're getting ready to step into, all of that is gift wrapped from a loving Father who goes, hey, I am giving you this not to worship, but to see me in the midst of it. But our problem is we take those good things from God and we try to build a tower to be better than the God that gave them to us in the first place. And so the question we've got to ask ourselves is where in your life have you started to build a Babel? And again, you wouldn't call it that. You'd rebrand it for something better. But where do you think, man, you rely on yourself more than you trust God? Where do you think that you're giving credit to yourself when it was really the Lord working? And what do you need to surrender in your life because it has become a Babel? I think the first thing that Solomon would tell us is that we don't need to rebrand Babel. I think the second thing that Solomon would tell us, if he wants us to have a healthy understanding of what work is he would say that for you and I, one of the main things that we need to do is we need to combat complacency. We need to fight against complacency. I think our culture is crazy. Like every single person in this room would say at some point in the last week, you've been overworked. You've had too much going on. It's been too crazy. And yet, I think Christian culture has responded to this in an interesting way. And I don't mean our church. I don't mean the Big C church. I mean like podcasts and TikToks and like influencers. The really sexy thing to do in Christian culture now is to swing that pendulum from being overworked to going, hey, you need to rest and have Sabbath. And those things are good. Like we're going to talk more about rest in a second. But the pendulum has swung so far that the focus is so much on rest that it actually villainizes work. It makes work seem like a bad thing, and you just need to rest. And anytime you start to work or be productive, it is sinful. And it's kind of started this spiritualized complacency where we go, man, I don't need to work because Jesus has already done the work in me. Theologically, is that true? Yes. You did not save yourself. You did not redeem yourself. You did not resurrect yourself. That's Jesus. Theologically, that is true. Practically, that is not the case at all. Work is not a bad thing. We just established that. Work is a good thing. And Paul would say it this way in 2 Thessalonians 3. He said, I hear that some of you are living idle lives. You're refusing to work and you're meddling in other people's business. Some of y'all would go, that's my freshman roommate. We command such people. Some of y'all are like, I have been that freshman roommate. He says, we command such people and urge them in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ to settle down and work to earn their own living. As for the rest of you, dear brothers and sisters, never get tired of doing good. I think what Paul is saying is the solution is not to throw off work. The solution is to rethink how we approach work. Take another look at Psalm 127:1. Solomon says, unless the Lord builds a house, the work of the builders is wasted. Unless the Lord protects a city, guarding it with sentries will do no good. Some people read these verses and they look at it and they go, okay, that's great. God's working, so I don't have to. But look at the tension that Solomon's creating there. He goes, unless God works, the work of the builders is wasted. Unless God protects, guarding it with sentries will do no good. He says, God is working, and so are the builders. God is protecting, and so are the guards at the gate. Solomon isn't saying that we shouldn't work. He's saying that God is working and we are working. He's just reorienting the priority there. He's going, God is at work, and he's inviting us into it. He's saying that we shouldn't become so complacent that we forget that the one who invited us into this work is the one who created it in the first place. What Solomon is saying in Psalm 127 is he's saying work doesn't exist to be a burden from God. Work exists to be a blessing done with God. Work is not a burden that God is just shoving on you like some kind of heavenly manager, expecting you to get it done by the end of the business day. He's going, hey, this is something I am inviting you into, not to be done for me, but to do with me. Because I'm a loving Father. Everything about Psalm 127 is an invitation to work with God, to join him in what he's doing. He's going, I've given you skills. I've given you passions. I've given you desires. I've given you things that you just excel in, and it lights you up in a way that you've never experienced before. And he's going, when I give you work, it's because I want to do those things with you. You're invited to take the skills that God has given you and join him in the work that he's already doing. Paul would say it this way in 1 Corinthians 3. He says, the one who plants and the one who waters both have a purpose, and they will each be rewarded according to their labor. He says, for we are co-workers in God's service. You are God's field, God's building. Another translation would say we are co-laborers with Christ, meaning we work with God, that God has given all of us a job to do, things that we're gifted at, skills that we've acquired. And his heart was never for you to be some kind of employee for him, but a partner with him in the work that he's doing. And here's the thing, y'all. This changes the game when you understand this. Because some of y'all are working desk jobs, and you're like, this is miserable because I sit at a desk all day, and I'm just doing this for a paycheck, and I'm really just trying to get this done. But what if you didn't? What if you viewed that sitting at a desk was not just an opportunity for you to scroll on your phone for like 5 or 6 hours a day, but it was an opportunity for you to greet every single person that walked into that office or walked into that dorm or walked into that business with so much joy, like Jody talked about a couple weeks ago, that over a couple weeks, people just get worn down by it, and they're like, why are you so freakishly happy? And you go, man, because Jesus has done something in my life, and I want to tell you about it. Some of y'all, you're working as waitresses or waiters, and this is a hard town to be in the hospitality business. And you're surrounded by people who walk around with entitlement, and then they act like they got a lot of money, but they tip like they broke. And it's really hard to sit there and keep your mouth shut. And you're going, I'm just doing this to get through it. But what if you didn't? What if you were the best waiter and the best waitress that this town has ever seen, and you served with so much excellence and so much grace that people looked at you and they said, well, they're treating you one way, but you're treating them a different way. Why is that? And you go, because Jesus treated me differently than I deserved. And so I'm partnering with him to show this town how he's different. Man, some of y'all, you are student teaching. And God bless you. You are waking up at the crack of dawn, and you're driving all over God's green earth, and you're not getting gas money. And you're going to schools where it's hard to teach, and you feel underappreciated, and you're kind of this just like accessory to what's happening, and you're in a weird like situation of not being appreciated, not being seen, but doing a lot of work. And you're going, man, I just can't wait till I can get to a real classroom and be a real teacher. But what if you started to see God do something now? What if God's going, man, I actually have you at that school, way out in that place, because I want you to show a student that walks in there that has never felt the love of Jesus, that they are loved and seen, that they don't have to earn it, they don't have to strive for it, but they can see it tangibly. God's going, hey, this is not just the work you do, this is the gospel that you partner with me in to bring to people who need to see it that may never step foot inside of a church. It's God saving you, but then it's you recovering and pursuing that identity and working with him. So I think if we want to get a healthy perspective of work, we understand that we don't want to rebrand Babel. We understand that we want to combat complacency. But I think the last thing that Solomon would tell us in Psalm 127 is that we need to work towards things that matter. We've spent a lot of time in verses 1 and 2. And I'll be honest, because when I was studying, those are really easy verses to talk about work with. Because you get to verse 3, and it makes no sense when you look at it with face value. Solomon's talking about work. It seems very work-oriented. He's like building, guarding, protecting. I'm like, I get it. And then all of a sudden you get in verse 3, and it's like, children are a gift from the Lord. And it's like, is this a commercial for me to give $1 a day? Like, I don't understand where the pivot happens. He goes, children are a gift from God. They're a reward from him. And you're like, Solomon was the wisest man. He had all the money. But I guess it was before ADHD meds came out. And so, like, I get it. Like, he just, like, squirrel. Like, it doesn't make sense. He's talking about work, and then he starts talking about kids. He said, children are a gift from the Lord. They're a reward from him. Children are born to a young man like arrows in a warrior's hand. How joyful is the man whose quiver is full of them. He will not be put to shame when he confronts his accusers at the city's gates. And you look at that and you go, what does that have to do with work? In one sense, nothing. And in another sense, everything. Because Solomon was a king and the leader of a nation, but Solomon was also a dad and the leader of a family. And what Solomon is doing in Psalm 127 is he's spending 2 verses talking about work, and then he's spending 3 verses talking about family. He's speaking to work-life balance. And he's giving instruction. Because what Solomon understands is that even when we're combating complacency and we're dependent on God, work can still become an all-consuming priority in our lives, and we can struggle with work-life balance. Statistics prove this. I looked up statistics for work-life balance now, and it says 66% of full-time employees right now say that they don't have a good work-life balance. That 45% of full-time employees say they don't have enough time for their personal life. That 50% of full-time employees have missed an important life event because of work. 38% say they've missed important family events because of work. And 86% of people who are full-time employees say they are working harder than ever before, and they're still not feeling like they're doing it well. Solomon's speaking to work-life balance because the truth is we are all striving for achievement and missing the blessing that is right in front of us. Here's the reality. Most of y'all probably do not have kids right now. But almost all of you at some point in your life will have children. And the habits that you build now determine the parent that you will be one day. And let me give you a case study in this from my life. I'm going to preface this by saying I am not an intelligent individual. The best thing I bring to a room is that I can clap with one hand. Like I don't have it. My college mascot was a fish. Like I don't bring a lot of academic prowess to the team. But when I was in college and the Lord started to get my life together, I was saved, following Jesus, but I still felt like I needed to prove something. And so I did my undergrad in 3 years and my master's in 2 while working 2 full-time jobs. Because I was like, I can't be the smartest person in the room, but I can be the hardest working. And so I had that mindset, and I got hired at a church right out of college, and there were smarter people with more experience. And I said, that's great. People will be smarter than me, but they will never outwork me. And so I would regularly work 60-plus hours a week. I first one in, last one out, taking work home with me, thought I was awesome. And you know what? I loved it because people praised me. It's like, oh my gosh, he's in his mid-20s, and he's so on fire for Jesus. He's working so hard. He's got such a good work ethic. And I was loving the praise. I was loving everything about it. And I wasn't realizing that I was building a bomb in my life. Because the habits that I was celebrated for in singleness ended up being some of the most destructive things that I would bring into my marriage and my parenting. Because Kat and I got married, and I remember trying to work 60-plus hours consecutively in different weeks, and she would get upset with me, rightfully so. And I would get mad at her, like, why does my wife not understand how awesome I am? Why is she not, like, sweeping me off my feet when I come home at night? Like, what's going on? And then we started to have kids. And I was like, why do my kids not see that I'm such an incredible dad and I'm working so hard? And it's like, well, they're 1 and 3. Like, they're kids. But my perspective was so skewed that honestly, God had to really graciously, but with a strong hand, refocus the things that mattered in my life. And what Solomon is teaching you in Psalm 127 is a lesson that I wish someone had taught me in my 20s. Solomon is saying that the work that you do matters, but the person that you become for your family matters more. Your career is awesome, but the covenant that you will step into one day as a spouse or as a parent is holy. And here's where I get this. He starts talking about all this imagery with arrows. And that matters because at that time, when people would go into combat, they would fight with a sword, a spear, or a bow and arrow. And a sword and a spear were great, but when you were fighting with a sword and a spear, like your range of motion, your range of impact was as far as you could reach. That was it. It couldn't go beyond that. You could only get to about right here. But the imagery that happens when he starts talking about an arrow is special. Because here's the thing about arrows. Unlike swords and spears, arrows make an impact beyond the place that they originate. When I shoot an arrow, it makes an impact beyond where I am standing. Solomon says that being a parent that values investing in your family over the work that you're doing, that values the calling that God has on your life to be a spouse made in his image, to be a parent made in his image, to be a child of God who is involved in a family matters more than the career that you are in. The work is good, the calling is better. Because one day you will die, but you have the opportunity to send out a bunch of arrows of kids who make impacts long beyond the life that you've lived and the way that you've lived it. Solomon is saying it matters, and statistics echo this. Children with involved parents, according to research, have higher self-esteem, better social skills, fewer behavioral problems, better mental health, higher graduation rates, better jobs in adulthood, lower poverty risk, lower crime involvement. It's a life of impact. And so you've got to ask yourself, when it comes to the work that you're engaging in and your work-life balance now, are the habits you're building now going to value the family that you have one day? Because the work that God is inviting you into with your job or your career is special, but the work that God can do through you as a parent one day is holy. And so you may be sitting there going, Daniel, that's great. I love that. That's awesome. How do I manage work well? How do I balance this? I think there's 3 things we can do quickly that are efficient and helpful as you begin to walk this out in your life. And the first one's this. When it comes to your work, before anything else, give it to God. And here's what I mean by that. Before you go into work in the morning, sit in your car and go, God, I pray that you give me wisdom to navigate the job that you have given me today and the perspective to see that you're with me in the midst of it. Something like that. You just pray and you go, God, I want you to be involved in this. Solomon would say it this way in Proverbs 16:3. He says, commit your actions to the Lord and your plans will succeed. He doesn't say, hey, start your day and then go, oh, shoot, God, sorry, I forgot about you, but things are on fire. Can you hop back in? He goes, commit your plans. Before they become actions, commit them to the Lord. Before you start that project, before you go in to take over your shift, before you start to dream up that next idea, give it to God first and go, God, man, will you be so present in this? Will you be the embodiment of what I want to be when I step into the room? Give it to God first and see what he'll do. So we give it to God. I think the second thing that we need to do when we want to work well and have a healthy understanding is we need to work for his glory and not our gain. 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. I am convinced, and I'm going to speak this over y'all. I think it's a great place for you to be and a great tension for you to exist in, that at some point in your life, you're going to have to make a career choice that is going to be between something that would be for gain for you or glory for God. I pray that he brings you to that fork in the road because it'll develop something in you. And I think everybody's going to have that moment in your life, but the reality is that we have micro expressions of that every single day where you constantly are having to make a choice. Is how I'm doing this going to be to advance my agenda or to give glory to God? Is this going to make me look good or is it going to make God's name praised? Like, what am I doing? And am I working in a way that is advancing my life for my gain, or is it lifting up the name of Jesus for his glory? And then I think the last thing is this, is we have to remember the Sabbath. Exodus 28 says, remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. The Sabbath day was a day of rest for God's people. It was a 24-hour period where they did not work. And they get it from Genesis 1. Because God created for 6 days and then he rested on the 7th. And the question begs to be asked, man, did God need to rest on that 7th day? Did God get tired? No. Did God need a second to be able to admire his work? No, that would insinuate that God is not able to work at the same time when he is also admiring something. The reason that God rested on the 7th day was to give us a model for our lives and to give us an opportunity to slow down and realize that work is not a burden, it is a blessing, and it's not something to be done for God, it's something to be done with him. And we only realize that in moments where we stop and we rest and we refocus on who God is. And some of y'all are sitting there today and you're like, that's great, but I don't know what that means to rest. Does that mean I stay in bed all day? Not necessarily. But for some of you, resting may mean sleeping a little bit more. I think if I was to sum up what a 24-hour Sabbath would look like, it is you setting aside 24 hours where you find time and you find ways to reconnect with the God who wants to meet you in your rest and in your work. And so for some of you, that's going for a walk. For some of you, not me, it's going for a run. I don't know. For some of you, it may be fishing or hunting or being out in the woods or spending time with friends or playing board games. It is finding time where you go, God, I am disengaging from work so that I can reconnect with you. And some of you may be sitting here and you're going, Daniel, that's great. I love that. But surely God doesn't expect me to take a full 24-hour period. Like, my life's busy. I got a lot of stuff going on. I'm very important in these parts. Like, I got things I got to get done. And if you find yourself in that place where you can't find one day every 7 days to take a break, then I think you've got to go back to the previous point and you've got to ask yourself, are you living a life that is for God's glory or your gain? Because if you are busy 7 days out of the week and you can't find time to be obedient to the thing that God has called you to, you are not living for God's glory. So what's that insinuating? Find time to rest. Think about it this way. I heard a story a while back about some lumberjacks. And there was a guy on the top of this mountain. He was an old lumberjack, and he was like world-renowned for being like the best lumberjack in the world. And this younger lumberjack heard about this guy, and he said, man, I'm going to challenge this old lumberjack for the title. And so he goes up to the top of this mountain, and he sees this older lumberjack there, and he says, hey, man, I want to challenge you to something. I want to challenge you to a competition. We're going to start at sunrise, and we're going to cut down trees from sunrise until sunset. And if I cut down more trees than you do, I get the title, and you get off the mountain. The older lumberjack says, all right, man, you're on. So the next morning, sun comes up. Both lumberjacks start cutting. And the young lumberjack, man, he's just swinging away, man. He is ripping at these trees, and he looks over, and the older lumberjack is keeping pace. Like, this dude's just chipping, and they're both just going out, and the younger lumberjack's like, man, I'm going to have to really ramp up my game. This guy's good. And so they're cutting, and they're cutting, and they're cutting. And a couple hours in, the older lumberjack stops. He takes his axe, and he walks into a shed. And the younger lumberjack is like, what an idiot. And so he just keeps cutting. He keeps cutting. He's like, I don't know what that guy's doing. About 15 minutes later, the older lumberjack comes back out. And the younger lumberjack is like, man, this guy's dumb. I'm going to keep going. So he's cutting. A couple hours pass by. Again, the older lumberjack stops. And he goes into the shed. The younger lumberjack is like, man, I'm not quitting now. I'm going to get a head start. I'm going to get a lead. This is going to be great. And every couple hours, the older lumberjack would stop. He'd go into a shed for about 15 minutes, and then he'd come back out. So they cut, and they get to the end of the day, and the younger lumberjack picks up his head, and there's just a look of horror on his face as he realizes that the older lumberjack had cut down like 3 times as many trees as the younger lumberjack. And he's just beside himself. He's like, dude, how did you do that? I never quit. I never stopped. I worked my butt off, and you were taking breaks every couple hours going into your shed? What was that about? And the older lumberjack looked at him with so much compassion in his eyes. He said, man, do you not realize what I was doing when I was going into my shed? I wasn't going in there just to stop the work. I was going in there to regain my edge on my axe. I was sharpening my axe every single time so that when I came out, I was able to cut better. He said, man, I felt so bad for you. You were sitting there swinging that axe all day, and you were blunting the edge more and more and losing your impact and working twice as hard for half the work. The secret of the older lumberjack was his ability to stop and regain his edge. And if you're being honest tonight, some of y'all are sitting in this room and you feel like that younger lumberjack because you've been swinging and cutting and trying and working to prove something, and you feel like nothing is happening. You're putting in twice the work as everyone else for half the amount of reward. And I think the Lord is looking at you today and he's going, the work is not the problem. The work is good. You just need to regain your edge, and I am the only one that can give you that edge. And so tonight, some of us may need to come to the front and pray with some friends and go, hey, I've been idolizing things. I've been building a Babel in my life, and it's been my performance. It's been my reputation. It's been my resume. It's been my LinkedIn. And I need to give that to God tonight because it is broken and it is producing brokenness in me. But some of y'all are in here tonight, and when you hear us talk about a God who loves you and you don't have to earn it, that seems foreign to you. And you may have been in church your whole life, but you have thought you had to be good enough, you had to keep yourself from sinning enough, you had to strive, you had to perform, you had to keep it all together, and that work was going to be the thing that made God love you. Can I tell you, the message that we just celebrated in Easter is that there is not a dang piece of work that you could have done that could have ever brought you out of sin, out of death, and into life. That the only work worth celebrating is the work that Jesus did on the cross. And he did it for you. So you could rest in that, yes, but also so that you could join him in the purpose that he really has for the rest of your life, so that you can recover and pursue the identity that he has for you and the work that he wants to do both in you and through you. That's the gospel. That's the God that he wants you to follow tonight. And some of you have never had a relationship with that God. That's what he's calling you to tonight. And so wherever you are, man, I would just encourage you tonight. Take some time. Pray with some of our friends down front. Let the Lord meet you in the midst of your work. Let him re-hone that edge in your life. Let him show you that the work that he has given you is meant to be a blessing, not a curse. And I promise it'll change everything. And so with every head bowed, every eyes closed, man, God, I pray specifically for people tonight that have felt like they need to perform in order to be loved. God, I pray that you just show them that you already love them tonight. God, there is somebody in this room who does not know you, that they thought they knew you. They thought that they knew that you were a God that wanted them to work and achieve and pursue. And God, I pray that you just show them that you want to love them unconditionally tonight, that you're calling them home. And God, I pray for all of us in this room, because we all have been in a point where we have idolized work, where we've become complacent. God, I pray that over these next couple songs, we just surrender that to you. We repent of that tonight. We ask you to meet us in that and show us a better way. And so, God, we thank you for the work that you have done on the cross, the work that you have done in our lives, and the work that you are continuing to invite us into. And we pray all this in your Son's name and for his glory. Amen. Will you all stand and worship with us?